Okay, welcome back to members of 121 Community Church in Grapevine, Texas. Our ongoing study in metaphysics by Borden Parker Bowne, published in 1882. We're going to take a look at a composite of the first three chapters. We're going to take a look at the entire phenomenology. For Bowne, metaphysics is phenomenology, and basically, if you look, this is our usual chart for a phenomenology. But if you notice, block 3, 4, and 5 give us chapters 1, 2, and 3. Block 3 is chapter 1, I, me, being. Block 4 in the center is chapter 2 in eidos, idea. And chapter 3 is in block 5 in telos, process. And if you notice in those three blocks, you transition from factors in block 3 to notions of the true in block 4 to causal units of positing in block 5. So that's the heart of his metaphysics, which is really phenomenology. For Bowne, metaphysics has to be phenomenology to be authentic. We're going to take a look at it now, and it's the same chart we're used to seeing, so same format. We're going to look at the entire first three chapters as a composite. Let's begin with block 1 in the bottom left. Our phenomenological starting point. Being equals every object of thought. There is an element of real being in all objects. Our task is to build a subjective scaffolding up against objectivity. Remember, he came up with that concept of a subjective scaffolding. I like that. That is up against objectivity as our grasp of the real. The scaffolding becomes the determining power of reality when our model is posited. Now, block 2, we pass through negation. Matter itself possesses its own force of resistance against our scaffolding of the real. We negate materialistic determinism, and we affirm the movement of a phenomenal world. We are doing phenomenology. We affirm the movement of a phenomenal world. Now, block 3 is empirical discrimination. The self as agent is given birth. We begin discerning the individual determining factors of this phenomenal world. The soul rises up to becoming a conscious activity. We perceive being and action as coexisting together. We discover the unique spatial distinction of any notion of being. So we start identifying factors that we consider to be important for this movement of being. But we in no way see them as interrelated as yet. They are just suppositions. So from block 3, we move up into the center of the chart to block 4, which is that Kunta Threshold of dialogue. Here is where we take our determining factors as suppositions and raise them up to notions of the true. The inner law or the essential nature is acquired through dialogue. Essential nature is discovered as a problem of reason as we reason with others in dialogue within the body of Christ. We rationally give essential nature a conceived notion. We give it a conceived notion of the true. Not yet organized into system, but we do gather together our lexical content of these notions of the true. So the factors are raised up to becoming notions because our factors are measured in dialogue with others, and then we define the notions of the true. So we've gone from discrimination of factors to selection of notions. Now in block 5 we take a look at judgment of causal units. We posit the notion of becoming as the absolute principle that abbreviates all other principles. Our factors, which are now raised up to notions, must be arranged into a system. We also take up the oughtness of positing this system, and as posited, The system encloses an order of causal units. Now, these terms become causal units as a system which depicts the kingdom. It becomes a system of causal units. And so Bowne tells us this becomes the true ground for change. It becomes the true ground for change. So from there we move on to block 6, we move on to positing, and now being itself will move through the dialectical circle of change. That's that concept that Bowne came up with that I really like. Being itself must pass through the dialectical circle of change. As positing agent, we provide permanence within the circle of change by holding our abiding flow of process. We become the abiding knower. We make process theory practical. We make process theory intelligible. We are that abiding knower. And as the abiding knower, we are going out of the self in outgoing desire, and that's where we get into block 7. We take up the praxis of change by our action and our speech through the phronesis practical shaping of our system of causal units. We tune it down into the practical. Within this ministry, we are the conscious self on a journey of self-discovery and refinement of state of mind. We do the work of raising up mere continuity of notions into an identity of true verification. So it is a construction of reality. It's also a construction of self-understanding. It is a movement from state of mind to state of mind. And that puts us into block 8. We construct the permanent self through positing and through outgoing desire. Bowne tells us true being is always personal. New forms of being are discovered and new forms of being are constructed. New conceptual principles are discovered for the 3 categories of the formal, the axiological, and the personalistic. And we're ready to refine that state of mind. And we do that through return moment in block 9. Out of the dialectical circle of change, we determine the process. That process is the real. This process is refined as we transition from state of mind to more mature state of mind. The flowing principle of action drives us into the self to revise our state of mind. We have this constant definition of process, this permanence that we do maintain in the midst of change. But we are driven back into the self with the discoveries of the new that we discover in praxis, and then we want to revise our sign model of kingdom by going back into the self and revising that sign model picture of the ideal kingdom that is moving toward fulfillment and fruition. So you'll notice that'll take you all the way over to the far left of the chart to block 10 and 11 for state of mind, and that feeds right back into the dialectic again, back to block 1. But central for this composite picture is block 3, 4, and 5. Block 3, 4, and 5 are chapters 1, 2, and 3. We go from being to idea to process. From being to idea to process. Being plus idea leads to process. The bottom row of the composite chart is the movement of being. The middle is that dialogue area of discerning the idea of the true. And the top is that entire process of moving through the posited system. We get into system across the top. And then we go back and start all over again. We never leave the ongoing dialectic. We want to move toward deeper and deeper and more mature grasping of spiritual truth. So block 3 is I, me, being. Block 4 is eidos, idea. Block 5 is telos, teleology. Being plus idea equals system. But also we have factors in block 3 becoming notions in block 4, becoming causal units in block 5. they become actual causal units that can effect change by the time we get to the posited system. They begin as factors that empower being, that can be attributed to movement of being. We begin with those factors, but those are suppositions that need to be refined. They get refined by dialogue with others in the body of Christ to discern which ones are really notions of the true. Once we define the notions of the true, then they have to become system. They have to become an order of causal units. And that's when we begin the work in Block 5, where we lift notion into causal unit, where it's going to make a difference. It's going to effect change in reality. It effects change because we go out of the self and outgoing desire. We can't stay in theory. We have to move on to phronesis, practical wisdom, and praxis, ministry. We have to go from gnosis to phronesis to praxis, from gnosis to phronesis to praxis. And then we can enact and seek verification of our theoretical sign model of kingdom, of the realm of spirit. So if you want to look for the heart of this composite, it's blocks 3, 4, and 5. It's the discrimination of factors, the selection of notions, and the judgment of causal units. We have been taught by Bowne that we begin with discrimination of factors. Then we move on to selection of notions of the true. Then we develop a system, which means we create a judgment of the causal units that will effect change. So we have a beautiful composite here, which we need this picture to continue the remainder of the book. So in the first 3 chapters, he gives us his composite metaphysic. That's going to wrap up this summary of chapters 1, 2, and 3, and next time we will pick up on chapter 4.